Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. That wasn't so hard. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. Inga mana, inga waka, inga hanatia, name, name, name. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much to the Center for the invitation. I have the great pleasure of sharing some thoughts with you this morning around system and culture. And where those two entities collide is right in that very interesting space around psychosocial factors. I love any minister that stands on stage and freely admits that he can't pronounce Listeria monocytogenes. I think it sets the tone for exactly how we need to look at food safety culture as well. It's okay to fumble along a little bit as long as you put your toes in the water and you do something with it. So I just want to make sure that you take the learnings from anything that the three of us will be sharing in this session in that manner as well. Can we agree on that? Can we agree?
Yes.
Thank you. So for this session, this is interesting because I can't see this. There we go. I'm going to just sort of try and have you discover this coalition a little bit more around food safety and culture. So when we take systems and we put that together, then we are right in that intersect where we're talking about risk awareness, specifically around psychosocial hazards. Might be new to some of you, but it's really where we're going to start seeing how we integrate systems around food safety with culture. Then we're going to look at the dimensions for food safety culture. Just get on the same page, all of us, to say what is it that we're talking about. And then go from risk awareness in and say, let's look at a case where we put all of this to work and we actually have a measurable outcome because somebody has looked at in their company how they can put psychosocial hazards, food safety culture, and systems together. So let's see what we have. I have to start by also just sharing my angle to food safety culture, where that comes from. For 11 years, I was part of a wonderful Canadian organization called Maple Leaf Foods. In 2008, we had a recall where 23 Canadians passed away because we had sent sliced meat in the marketplace that was contaminated with Listeria monocytogenes. I can tell you exactly the shape of the tree and the color of the sky that I passed when I was notified of what had happened. Because the organization that I had joined in 2004 was one that was growing, was expanding. It was a hopping place to be. It was where you wanted to be if you were anything in food safety or food industry in Canada. And literally overnight, on August 23rd, when we were actively associated with these 23 deaths, our company became something entirely different. My job became to work with our newly hired Chief Food Safety Officer to set a new food safety strategy. After that, we'd done the root cause analysis based on the independent investigation. There's a lot of reasons why this happened, but if you start to peel back the onion, it really came back to our organizational culture. Yes, we had some systemic improvements that we could make and had to make, but it really came back to the assumptions that we made as leaders in an organization that had about 67,000 people at the time, and we had 45 plants. We made these assumptions that when it came to risk for food safety, that was something that our food safety and quality department took care of. We had some of the strongest food safety and quality people that you could probably find, but we had left it entirely up to them to take action on food safety. It was also a company and a culture where food safety was not discussed by our board of directors in our executive team on a regular basis. It wasn't measured to an extent where our business leaders could actually say, I know what this means. I can make sense of food safety in the context of us as a successful food business. So all of that had to change. And after 2008, we worked together across our organization to change our culture. A culture where food safety became a part of being a successful company. Food safety was what made us a successful company. And it became part of our culture. But you can't make that kind of change and make it sustainable unless you put culture and system together. And that's really what we need to talk about here today is how do we take those great practices that we have had for so many years around food safety management systems and put them together with what we know for food safety culture. First and foremost, let's just all again get on the same page, because there's a lot of different thoughts around food safety culture out there today. What is it that we're talking about? I'm not going to teach you about a definition here, but if you go to the GFSI position paper that came out, there's a definition in there. There's just a couple of things that I want to hit on this definition. Culture differentiates itself from individual behaviors by the sheer fact that it's shared. And I think this morning, just listening into and seeing how all of you are acting together is a great insight into the New Zealand culture. And it's something you share. It's the same with food safety culture. If food safety is not shared in your organizational culture amongst everybody that works with you, or if you're a regulator in that regulatory agency, then you don't have a very strong, mature food safety culture. If I can walk in and talk to anybody in your companies, be that at the front line or at the top of your house, and if they can't give me a good sense for what are the risks and assets that we're dealing with uniquely for our company, then you don't have a mature food safety culture. In the spirit of the future, I can tell you I'm also worried about whether we're doing enough. And I see it from the angle of culture, and no, we're not. Are we getting there? Yes, we are. But we're not doing enough collectively as a global industry, because people are still dying from the food that we make. And therefore, we can't really rest on the laurels that we have strong systems. We have to get there with our culture as well. The other thing I want to just hit on in this definition is that, again, it's in, towards, and throughout an organization. So when you have mature cultures, that means that you've actually taken the time to get that finance clerk to understand what she does for food safety every day. That tow motor driver that's there on the midnight shift, he knows what he's doing. That CEO, she knows exactly what her role is as well when it comes to food safety. And they're unique to their roles. And that takes effort. So it's something that when we have these mature cultures that has been deliberately formed and continuously being rolled out through engagement of employees. If we look at the dimensions, when we work with food safety culture, and you'll find the same in the GFSI position paper, you'll find the same dimensions in the PASS 320, Practical Guide to Food Safety Culture. We look at these 5 dimensions. And it's really, my point in showing you this today is just to make sure, again, we're on the same page as for what is it that we're talking about when we talk food safety culture. The first one is around vision and mission, and it has to do with how your leadership is set up around messaging with food safety, listening in on food safety. I'll give you a case again where we can see sometimes that doesn't work so well. It's around setting direction and expectations. Are we all on the same page for where food safety decision-making and investments fit in what we do overall as an organization and why it's making us successful? It's around how you've maybe have taken a step back and said, what's our business structure for today? Where does food safety and quality report in? Is it something that reports up into your operations department? Does it report directly into a CEO or managing director? Is it something that sits in an altogether different part of your organization? But that structure makes a difference as for how decision making is made every day, how autonomous you are in what happens as well. And are you doing that with a purpose? I'm not going to go through this, but slides and everything will be yours after this as well. But on the outside of this wheel, the Cultivate wheel, we have some suggested tactics or tools that you can apply if you find that you're specifically weak in one of these dimensions. Around people has a lot to do with incentives, rewards, and recognition. Unfortunately, we grew up a long time ago in caves where it wasn't about the positive recognition that got us going out and looking for food every day, and therefore it was the negative recognition. I don't have anything to eat, I gotta go kill something. And therefore, neurologically, we're sort of built to that we'll rather go towards the negative recognition than we'll go towards the positive recognition. So therefore, we have to build in these recognition mechanisms into when we're looking for food safety culture as well. And yes, it is sometimes okay to thank people for coming to work and doing what they're doing every day. Some people need that. It's also okay to say that if a group of people are doing an especially good job around food safety, that there's something unique that they get recognized with as well. So recognition and rewarding is a big part of that. Then we look at learning organizations. Bit of a pet peeve of mine, because I think we put a lot of checks in boxes these days around food safety training. We have a list of training courses. This is what you need to take if you're in this role with us. We put some checks in boxes. We don't necessarily go back and see, have people actually learned something? And have they learned what they need to then behave in a certain way constantly and consistently? It's really difficult to say again that you have a mature food safety culture if you haven't gone to that perspective of verifying that people are actually learning what they need to do and can give you that feedback to say, I don't know what this is about. I understand where we're going. I've taken these training courses. I still don't understand my unique role. Okay, let's deal with that. And that's what you do in the people dimension. And then it's how you're dealing with your stakeholders, both internally and externally. How are you dealing with your regulators? How are you dealing with your customers when it comes to food safety? How are you dealing with everybody in all different functions when it comes to internally in your company as well? The third dimension is around adaptability. And I'll give you a sort of a little sneak peek on this one, because adaptability, we've measured food safety culture in about 155 companies to date. And some of them are very, very large, some of them are very, very small. But one of the things that we see most consistently is that they're weak in this adaptability dimension. It has to do with change management. It's a little bit of a new practice for many food safety professionals to think about change management. We think about compliance a lot. We don't necessarily think about what it means to manage change where people want to come with us. And I'd like you to think about change as in, so if change is important to somebody, neurologically, the way that we see the centers in our brains that we see light up are exactly the same centers as those that would light up if somebody had just taken food and drink away from you. So it's literally about survival. And it's also about thinking about those changes that are important to me might be very different to somebody else. So if we have a new CEO in our company and I work on the line, it's actually probably not such a big deal for me. But if we work together on the line every day, I'm used to seeing you right next to me. You know my children, you know my pet, you know all of the challenges I have with my husband. And all of a sudden you're gone. That's a change that matters. So when we talk about food safety culture and making change, yes, it's the devil's in the detail on that one as well. Actually figuring out what are the types of changes that matters to individuals. And then involving people in that. And then it's about agility. We're in the process of removing that word from our wheel because it's a little bit of a plastic word. But it is literally about how agile are you. Love the comment that was made this morning around that nothing is static. And I think if we treat food safety as something that's static and will never change again, then we are going to definitely have something that happened that we didn't anticipate, because everything is changing around us, be that people, be that the bugs that we're dealing with every day, be that how we're engaging with the global food industry as well, and therefore we have to be agile to those types of changes and see the opportunities in them. And then we're looking at expectations and current state in that one as well. The fourth dimension is where how many food safety professionals in industry is in the room? Can you show me your hand, please? Be proud of it, because yep. Thank you. This is where all of you are getting very excited, and I can tell by looking at you. Because consistency is all about documentation. It's about performance measures. It's about accountability. So now we're getting really, now we're seeing your blood pressure go up, because this is my turf, right? I know what this is all about. I'm sorry to disappoint you, because this is not whether you have these systems in place. This is what you do with them, right? So I know nobody does this anymore, but do you have a standard operating procedure that's printed out on a piece of paper, and I go into a supervisor's office and I see a whole pile of coffee stains on it, and there's scribbles on it over here, and it's in 7 different colors of pen, and underlining and all sorts of things, because they're being used. So people are actually taking these SOPs, they're taking the data, and they're saying, okay, are we winning? Let me go have a chat with my team, because I see a little blip over here. Looks like we did something really good. Let's celebrate that. So the consistency dimension is really all about all of your food safety management system and the components of it, but how you use them every day. It's not whether you have them. We're not talking about being compliant. It's whether you actually use them and who's using them. Are they actually creating difference for you? And then we talk a lot about accountability in this one as well. How that's defined, how you help people take account, and how that fits into everything else that you're doing in your organizational culture. The last dimension is around hazard and risk awareness, and I had the pleasure of chairing the GFSI working group that came up with a position paper on food safety culture, and we talked about this one a lot. Is it actually a fifth dimension, or is it something that's embedded in the other four? And we decided that it's the fifth dimension because we're talking about food safety. Food safety is all about risk. It's all about hazards. It's all about how we are able to communicate with those we work with every day if we are food safety professionals. It's about how do we grow that risk mindset in everybody in an organization that's in food, because your food safety risks is the very thing that makes you unique when it comes to food safety versus being in a different industry. Right after our recall at Maple Leaf, we ran about 37 foundation courses with our leaders and middle managers. And one of the professors we work with from the University of Guelph, he would get so upset when somebody couldn't figure out why the salespeople had to sit in the room, or the finance people, and he would jump off. He was sitting on this little chair, and he'd jump up and he would just go, because you don't make widgets, you don't make bolts, you don't make car parts, you make food. And that's the very reason why we have this dimension in our Cultivate wheel as well, is that we talk about whether people have a risk awareness around food. Do they actually understand that when they bend down and they pick something up from the floor, what is it, the risks that they're dealing with? Because most of the time, people don't do that because they want to do something wrong. They do that because they want to have a tidy space, right? But they don't necessarily have that risk awareness. And then it's around how we're engaging our employees in food safety. Do we use scare tactics and say, hey, if you don't do this right, this and this could go wrong, and line out the consequences that way? Or do we also engage individuals in saying, you know exactly what's going on your line, piece of the line, or in your functional area, and we'd like you to tell us what you think food safety means if you're in finance, HR, or on the line in a specific place. So that engagement is part of this one as well. And then how you're fundamentally educating everybody on hazards when it comes to food safety is part of this as well. I'll talk a little bit more about that because we're diving into this very dimension when it comes to how do you take psychosocial factors and roll that into what you do for food safety. If you have any questions, I should have said that up front. Please interrupt and let me know. If not, then I'm just going to keep talking because this is my soapbox. So I'm just warning you up front that very rarely do I leave behind some time that's not spoken in or used. So if we look at hazard and risk awareness specifically, this is what we've learned over the last almost 10 years in Cultivate now. We keep coming back and we poll senior leaders as for how many of you actually know your risks, your hazards and risks when it comes to food safety. When we started, this was around 43%. And last time we did this in 2023, we were up to 52. Essentially, that means that about half of the business leaders that we have polled on this, they don't know their risks for food safety. It means that if I go in and I do this a lot, I speak a lot with CEOs and senior executives, and I ask them the very question, what are your food safety hazards? Some of them can sort of muster up a good pathogen. Very rarely can I get them actually talking about risks, and it bothers me, I will tell you, because hazards are not risks. Hazards become risks when you are assigning a severity and a likelihood to them. How likely is it that this pathogen is going to be in our environment and therefore make it onto the food that we're selling to somebody else and making a living off selling to somebody else? What would be the severity if somebody was to ingest it? It bothers me tremendously when senior leaders don't understand that equation, because it's at the very foundation of what makes their company viable that they have control over that equation of risk assessment. So 52, from 43 to 52 in about 10 years. Again, I go back to, is there something we should be lying awake at because of at night? I think this would be one of them. I just don't think we have put our senior leadership into a position where they can own this information. Apologize if any of you out there are senior leaders in all of these fabulous companies, and if you know this and if you have these answers to these questions, please raise your hand. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'd love to hear from you because you're clearly in the other 48%. So let's go back and just revisit what it is, because that would be a lost opportunity if we didn't. We have the 3 types of hazards that we all know and love. We have our physical hazards that wood, hair, plastic, you name it. I learned in Australia that there's some really interesting insects there as well that will go into this. Some people call them biological, but I guess it depends if they're alive or not. Biological, you all know those. Salmonella, Listeria monocytogenes, chemicals. We talk about allergens, equipment grease, cleaning chemicals. These are hazards. And great that we can ream off all of these hazards. Where it really becomes interesting is when we start to do a classic risk assessment on this. And where we go, for example, if we have a cleaning chemical residue, what's the severity? In this case, they have assessed it that it could cause a product recall for them. And in this particular situation, they said it's not likely to occur. This type of assessment is very process-oriented. Process flow diagram, we like to put boxes into it, document, and we do our assessment on it, and then we say, is it a high, medium, or low score? There's nothing wrong with this particular assessment, it's just missing a key element. Because if we just take that particular approach to risk assessment, we are making a huge assumption. We're saying that all of our food is made in those boxes without the intervention of human beings. We are making an assumption that we have high, medium, or low risks for food safety dependent on a process view only. And it's giving us a false sense of security, because in most companies that deal with food, that makes a profit of making food, we have human interventions. We have got to get stronger at building that into our risk assessments. That's where the psychosocial factors come in. If we back it up a little bit and just say, okay, so what we're talking about here are our behaviors. Behaviors, the way that we look at them, we use the reason-action model for everything that has to do with behaviors. Behaviors are observable. I can see how all of you are behaving by looking at you. It has a time factor. Is it something you do consistently every day at 7 a.m.? I go to my car, I sit in it, and I get to the office by speeding. That's a behavior. Or the others, depending on where you're at. And it has a reason why. So if we look at if we go back to the cleaning chemical residue contamination, there's a supervisor that says, I review food safety data with my team monthly because somebody has told her that she has to do that, or because she believes that her team and her can act on improving cleaning actions. They're essentially the same behavior, but with a very different reason why. Right? So if we take that scenario, and then we say we go back to our cleaning chemical residue example, we still have that we could have a recall because we can't really play God. We can't say that we can change severity, so severity stays the same. If we look at likelihood, though, if the reason I have been given for reviewing our data around cleaning effectiveness is that some food safety and quality manager has come along and said, do you know what, Lone, I need you to every day, need you once a month at least, you need to look at this data because it says so in our SOP. And if you don't do that, we're going to get a finding next time that we have an FSSC 22,000 external audit, right? What that results in could actually be that we have a higher risk for cleaning residue in our product, because I will go through the motions and I will put a check in the box and I will tell you I am compliant, because last time I checked, it was on all our bonuses and performance reviews that we have to pass our FSSC 22,000 audit. So I'm going to do my bit. So if we take that into the classic risk assessment, we've actually just elevated the risk for cleaning chemical residue, because I'm not doing anything to try and mitigate that we have any residue in our product, because the only reason why I'm looking at data is we just need to pass an audit. If we take the other scenario where I'm doing this because I know that I can, with my team, control what we're doing when it comes to cleaning, and whether there's any residue left that could actually cause harm to somebody, I could lower the risk because I have a reason why this is important. I know the consequences if we don't do this. I can now be proactive around how we're making sure that we're looking for at all of these data to make sure that we're not leaving anything behind. We're starting to scratch the surface a little bit as for how we can build in these psychosocial hazards and factors into our hazard analysis, because there's a difference in the two scenarios here. If I just know that I have to do this, my control over that particular action, which job control is a psychosocial factor, is relatively low. I just have to go do this because it's just somebody has told me to do this. If I know why I'm doing this, if I know how it fits into what we do every day, then I have a higher degree of control over that, and therefore my psychosocial hazard around this particular food safety hazard is actually lower. This adds a whole new level of complexity when you do your hazard analyses for HACCP. But what it does, and what's so absolutely brilliant in this, is it takes you off this false assumption that you know exactly what your risks are just by looking at a process into the real world where you've added behaviors to your hazard analysis as well. And therefore, you can actually say that here's where we have high risks, because we might have a supervisor in that area that doesn't have a great level of engagement with his or her team, and therefore we don't think that we're necessarily going to get the same set of eyes on the process every day for looking out for whether there could be some cleaning chemical residue leftovers. It's also a whole new world when it comes to how you do your hazard analysis, because you have to have the cross-functional team. You have to have your people leaders in on this discussion, because it can't be a food safety and quality team only that does the hazard analysis in this new world. This is where we have to go to build in food safety culture and systems so that together they're actually giving you the best protection for everybody, like the rest of us that are counting on safe food every day. Does this make sense? Yeah? Why is that? There's a very strong yes over here. Why is that?
It's because we're managing the risk.
Yeah, for sure. There's a very strong yes here as well. And we have a microphone. See, you didn't see this coming, did you? Where do we have a yes? We had another yes? See, this is behavioral science in action, right? So I start to pick on you because you said yes, you stop saying yes. So I mean, that's how this works. So does this make sense when we're talking about psychosocial hazards this way? Can we get a microphone for Anne? Sorry, Anne. You've always been a good role model.
Well, first of all, I'll say because we've had the lived experience with loan for about 8 years now, it definitely, thinking in this space, has improved the performance of the industry players that an organisation that I chair the board of, which is a regulator, to actually see how changing behaviours in companies has improved the performance of the system and has actually, if I can say, made the work of the regulator so much easier. But it's not just about the changing behaviours in the regulated, it is actually changing the whole behaviour system for the regulator. And it is one of the most critical turning points and influences in terms of flipping the regulatory system that I've actually ever seen, and looking across all of a particular industry sector, the dairy industry sector in Victoria, and now that is actually permeating into other jurisdictions and across other sites for companies that work across jurisdictional boundaries. But it's a long, hard road, but if you don't start, you won't see that difference. It also has been translated into actually stripping what have been the traditional costs of compliance out of businesses so they can actually see those tangible benefits when it comes to the bottom line. And so that's just been the lived experience loan, and it's been fantastic, and I would recommend it to anyone because it makes all our lives so much easier, as well as making the systems more cost effective, more productive, but also raising the question of, are we doing enough? And it's that sort of thinking that is working across the whole of the food industry sector that we have been learning. But it's a long journey, but if you don't start, you don't start to see those differences. Thanks, Lo.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anne. It is about starting, and then it's about never stopping, candidly, because the likelihood that you'll ever reach an end on this is relatively low, but that's part of the fun as well. So if we go from the practical risk assessment and then go in and look at, so how is it that the systems and culture fit together? I like to think about it sort of a bit of a perfect Venn diagram where you have your system side of things and then you have culture. You can't really have strong systems without a look to culture. You can't have a really sustainable, mature culture without a look to systems. So it is a perfect world for food professionals, in my mind, to grow into, because we have that very strong system thinking, and now you're going to add the culture system or culture thinking into that, and many of you already do. When we're thinking about the culture, it goes back to the definition. When we're thinking about systems, it's about our programs at data and technology. That's how we choose to look at it. Psychosocial risks specifically is around how you're looking at your job control, role clarity, how individuals have relationship with those that they work with, and also whether there's support for managers. And all of those four are very measurable. So the way that we look at 2.0 on our measurement systems is that this is part of measuring food safety culture, to measure these four things. Whereas if we're looking at our systems, it could be something like your hazard program. We're looking at our hazard teams, the process flows, etc., the things that many of you know so very well. But we really have to look at this in this perfect Venn diagram for the future, where there is an overlap and both sides are very measurable as well. Psychosocial hazards or factors and hazards. I mentioned job satisfaction. Many people or companies do engagement surveys. Great input into looking at your psychosocial factors as well and building that into your hazard analysis. It's also about your ability to get things done on time. When we measured psychosocial factors with companies for about a year now, so we're still getting a really robust measurement system out of it. This is the one that they more frequently than not score very low on. People just can't get things done within the allocated time at the quality that you're expecting. And this is again where it fits perfectly in with food safety. Because if we just look at food safety from a checking the box and being compliant perspective, we're not taking into account that sanitation shift actually very rarely has 8 hours to get the work done. We did some work with a couple of our clients where we took all of how much time did you actually spend on sanitizing the plant versus how much do you think people think that you have available. Very rarely do they have 100% of the time, because they get the room, they get the plant late, they have to hand it over a little earlier as well because there's somebody there, gotta get this right? And that's fair enough, because if we're in the food industry, we're not there for philanthropic reasons, but this is really where the psychosocial pressure comes in as well, because do we actually give people the time to get the job done? It's also about collaboration. We've seen a lot of churn in frontline team members, professionals at the middle management level as well. So are you getting new team members in that come in with a different norm or different expectations, and therefore the collaboration that we had before might actually be going away? That influences how we actually go to each other and ask for help if we're seeing something that doesn't work. The same with influencing the workload, and the last, and whether we're actually getting the support from our supervisors. So these, again, are very measurable. So when I'm faced with that somebody comes up to me and says, yeah, but Lone, food safety culture is all about the soft stuff. I cannot stand that comment. I'm so sorry. Because it is, yes, it has to do with us as human beings. It's a science like food science. And it's very measurable. It's very quantifiable. And it has to be because, again, we live in a world where we make food because we're making a profit on it to serve it to other people. And that is fair. It's okay to call that out. But it's also okay to call out that food safety culture and this soft stuff is very measurable. Wanted to share this with you as well. Had the pleasure of putting out an article. Again, we're just starting to publish on this. We have a peer-reviewed paper that's about to get submitted. But it's really about saying, so what is it, what is food or psychosocial factors and risks, and how can you connect it to your hazard analysis? And also, where is it that it starts to impact the behaviors that we see in food plants and food companies every day? How are we doing for time?
Good. 15 more minutes.
Perfect. Let's look at a case. So this is a case from a company that we work a lot with, and it's Jay's story. Jay is their CEO. It's a dairy company. They have about a little over 900 farmers that supply milk to them every day. And they have 7 processing facilities across the US. There's a very passionate executive team in this company. I'm very impressed with them. They want to make a difference, they just don't necessarily know how to. And we've got the pleasure over the last couple of years to help them figure out what does that mean. Because they really want to reduce the risk from a food safety perspective, both in respect for their farmers, who work hard every day to get milk to them so that it can be processed or it can be bottled, but also towards their consumers. They have a very metric-oriented culture. So if you want something done, you've got to have a metric around it, and then they will act on it, and then they will make a change. If you just say, hey, we think we should include these new types of products, and we'll figure out how that's going to make a difference for us, you're likely going to get a, yeah, that's not going to happen. Because they would like to see measures. Measures drives behaviors in this organization. So that also means that when one of their key measures was customer complaints for food safety, that they were constantly thinking, doing pretty good, because we very rarely get any customer complaints when it comes to food safety. How many of you have ever had a tummy ache? Yeah? Can you put up your hand again? All of you? Yeah, take it as a stretching exercise early in the morning. Yep, thank you. So keep your hands up. Yeah, that type of group. Take your hand down if you went to the doctor. Yeah, we're not quite sure over here if we went to the doctor, maybe. So you can take your hands down. So most of us, we don't go to the doctor if we have a tummy ache, right? And we might have have some foodborne illness, but we don't go to the doctor because a couple of days, maybe 3, then it goes away. So their customer complaints in this particular organization would very rarely, if ever, show that there was anything wrong with their food safety, because they used customer complaints as their indicator for whether they actually had robust food safety. How many of you use customer complaints in your organizations to measure food safety? You can be okay. It's okay to be proud of it. Yeah? Good. So a couple of you. It's one of my least favorite indicators when it comes to food safety because it's so lagging, and you almost always spend more time debating them than you do actually making change because of them, right? Yeah, but it's because, I've seen how people handle that. It's because they make it, it's our consumer's fault, right? When in fact, it's something that all of us need to look into if we use it as a measure. So these guys did the same. Then we said, okay, let's do something different. We worked with them on their near-miss program. So they define near-miss as almost similar to what you would do in a Gemba walk. So near-miss for these guys means that you take time and you go out and you walk the floor. You do that in pairs of 2. So if I'm Jay, their CEO, then I might today be walking with a forklift driver from our midnight shift, and we'll be walking in a certain area. We have a form that we need to fill out, and I'll show that to you in a second. We discuss with those that work in that area what we see. We listen to them, so it's really a practice for executives as well to demonstrate they have 2 of this. and one of this. And then they go and they also file their learnings, and they have some corrective actions against them. There's a lot of follow-up on this as well, at least from a process perspective. So classic sort of near-miss program. There's the sort of guidance that they have, stay focused, so they're very focused on the goals of getting this done, and they go and they interact with their team members, and when I visit with them, the first thing that a plant manager will do is shove one of these forms in my hands when I get there, and then go take a walk, right? Because I have a new set of eyes. I don't work there every day. I see different things. And then there's a discussion around what they've learned, and then they take these corrective actions again, and they put that into a system, have a database, they've invested in all of this. It's systemically very strong. That happened 3 years ago. Then we came back last year, and I said, so how's that going for you? Well, you know, we had it went really well, and it's a good system, and yeah, but we've just got a new ERP system, and can you spell SAP, suffering and pain? And it was just not going well for them. So then we put this schedule up on the wall, and it was for 3 months. Had the leaders down the one side, the part of the plant that they were supposed to do a walk in, and big poster laminated right where everybody can see it. We're thinking social pressure, right? Positive peer pressure. This is going to work, because now it says, okay, Peer is going to do this on line A in January. He's going to go to line B in February. He's going to do line C in March. And again, this is going to work, because now we can see, everybody can see what is expected of them. And there are different areas. So in line A, we know who's going to get there. Up it goes, it's up on the wall, and we can see again who's going to go where. Then we get this back, right? We all know what red and green means in this case. Red means that it didn't happen. Green, yes, we did get done what we were supposed to do. So we're thinking, okay, people still don't get done, or don't do these walks, even though we have it up on the wall, color it in if it's green, we have the red, etc. But then we started linking it to food safety performance indicators. And we said, so, okay, if you do a walk, is there actually a correlation or a prediction of your GMP performance and also this factor that we call hands raised? So what we saw was, after 3 months, data set of one company, 3 months, right? So take it for what it is for now, is that if the walks happened, we saw higher compliance to GMP. So people would garb up, have their gloves on, have their face masks on. They would have everything on that they needed to. They would act the way they're supposed to according to the GMPs. And there would be more hands raised. The way we defined that was that every time that a supervisor had a conversation with somebody, did somebody actually say, hey, I've got a question around this food safety that we're supposed to be doing, or I saw this happening. I don't think that's right. Can we do something about that? So individuals that work in that area, do they actually speak up if they want to see something different? So if there's a presence, in this case, from leaders on their lines, they will, those working there will do what they're supposed to from a GMP perspective and hold each other accountable, but they'll also raise more points when it comes to what can we do different. This lines exactly up with what we believe that psychosocial factors can do for us from a food safety perspective. Because it's about where the leaders actually show up and paying attention to what's going on in the place where food safety happens every day, on the line. And this small, very small data set, very small study actually tells us that if people do that, if leaders come and they start to ask questions, then they listen to if things have to change, that we see a higher level of compliance when it comes to GMPs. We also see better engagement of those that work in the area. There's more hands being raised to say, I need to see something different, or do you know what, my colleague did this really well, can we do more of that? That to me is very encouraging, because it puts some measures into the hands of leaders to say, if you do your bit, we're going to see better compliance in our plants, we're going to see better engaged staff, And also it gives leaders that feedback as for what's going on, what is it that we need to do more of and less of when it comes to driving food safety in our organization every day. Does this make sense? Why is that?
I mean, I see it.
Yeah?
I see it.
Yeah?
It does make sense, and you do see the engagement when you go and talk to people. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, you do see the engagement when you actually go and talk to people and communicate with them. If you don't show up, then they just do what they want to do.
Yeah.
They'll revert back. It needs to be consistent.
Consistency is key, isn't it? Yeah. Which clearly our friends could do a little better here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Do you measure something like this?
No.
Okay.
No.
Might be something to consider.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes.
There was a yes over here. I don't know if you noticed this part of the room sort of winning right now. Yeah. And I know that Roger doesn't like losing, so we're going over here. Does this make sense to this side of the room? Be courageous. It's okay. Sir, you've got something to say, I can tell. Can we get a microphone over here? Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it definitely makes sense. I'm not involved on the line or anything like that, but you can see it's logical, and when your managers are more involved with what you're doing, you take it more seriously, and you see, oh, this is important to them, so it must be important overall. So yeah.
And it literally does come straight back to those psychosocial factors, because whether your manager is supporting you in what you need to get done is a direct correlation as well to engagement. So I think there's something there that we need to do more with. This is, again, just a very small snapshot. I'm going to wrap up, right? Yeah. And I'd like to do that just with a couple of takeaways. I'd really encourage all of you just to have a structured way of looking at risk awareness. Find a framework that, how do you take risk awareness and you translate that into behaviors? How do you translate it into what you're expecting from your leaders, your middle management, and those very important frontline team members? Integrate your food safety and psychosocial risks. It's a little bit of, for most food safety professionals, sort of jumping off a cliff to think of that, because I have this nice control over my hazard analysis today because it's very process-oriented. You've got to think about the human factor in that equation. And this is one way you can do that. And then select a tactic to measure so that you can drive that risk awareness as well. Bring risk thinking into what you do from a food safety performance measurement perspective so that you drive that risk mindset with everybody that you work with every day. Because if you do that, then you get these fabulous situations like the one I observed with one of our Australian clients. So this is also one of these clients that when I come to their plant, especially the one in Sydney, then the first thing that they do, there's two things that stand out for me. I'm very rarely greeted by a plant manager or a QA manager. It's usually somebody from the line that comes and says, oh, hello, I'm so-and-so, and I'm going to take care of you while you're here. That's a mature organization in my mind. And then they shove this Gemba card in my hands. So I have to walk out and I have to do a Gemba walk with them as well, because they take advantage of that I have a set of eyes that are not acclimatized to what they see every day. I see something different because I'm not with them every day. I am not that culture. I can have that external view to them. And last time I was there, I met Bindi and Sue. In this particular plant, red hairnet means that I'm in training. And they're at this conveyor where baby spinach is being unloaded from crates onto a conveyor, and then Bindi and Sue are in a position where they have to look for foreign material. And there's some spinach that's flowing over the edges of this conveyor. And at some point, Sue, red hairnet here, she bends down to pick up some of the spinach that's on the floor. This is where food safety professionals go, oh! And she's down there and she's picking up, and Bindi, before Sue can do anything with what she's picked up, makes her first and foremost just drop this again, and then she explains to her, under no certain circumstances can she touch anything that's on the floor, and then especially take product and put it up onto the conveyor. And she explains to her why she can't do that. Then she does something that's really unique for this particular culture in my mind. Then she goes, why did you do that? And I'm standing there like a bug on the wall, just sort of listening in. And she goes, well, because my family are farmers. And growing something like spinach is hard. And it's not a very profitable industry. So I want us to save every piece of spinach that comes into our factory. She was doing something good when she bent down to pick up this product. And Bindi was doing something incredibly good because she was preventing something that could be very bad for those of us that eat spinach. My point with this everything that I've shared with you today, and hopefully what we're going to be learning from each other for the rest of the day, is that if we can get as many Bindis in the global food industry at the front line as possible, then we have mature cultures. That's why we focus on food safety culture, to make sure that we have individuals like Bindi who will take the time to make sure something bad doesn't happen, but also take the time to understand why a mistake is made and therefore avoid something bad to happen as well. So I'd like to end on that, if that's okay, with our fabulous facilitator, moderator, toastmaster, whatever you're called. Tēnā koto, tēnā koto, tēnā koto katoa. Thank you.